There's only 24 hours in a day. I got a pair of earbuds and I wish there was a way that I could know just what I want to listen to. There's 150,000 shows that I'm not sitting through. When the world is dark and boring, let us do your exploring. Pod on pod. Pod on pod.
Welcome to Pod on Pod, a guide to the world of podcasts because it's not your daddy's radio. We're your hosts.
I'm Josh.
And I'm Joel. And this week we're reviewing the Joe Rogan Experience. Oh my. Oh my. If you, of all of the things, of all of the potential people that I would have thought would have been in our first batch of shows, Joe Rogan would not have been one of the hosts. But you and I discussed it. We wanted, every 5 shows or so, we wanted to have hey, here's a big popular show that a lot of people, very mainstream podcast,
Right.
As mainstream as they can be. We want to have a couple of marquees so that we can bring some more people into the fold, first of all, but also we want to expose people that are potentially new to podcasting. Hey, these are the ones that people hold up as the big marquee shows.
And they did. Joe Rogan Experience did win the 2013 Stitcher Award for Best Podcast.
And he's been doing it a very, very long time. As a matter of fact, let's see, the Joe Rogan Experience first debuted December 24th, 2009. It's a comedy
That's
podcast.
a lot of time, man. I mean,
it is. I mean,
for as young as a medium as this is, 2009 is, getting in early.
Joe Rogan wasn't one of the first people into podcasting, I would say. What he was, though, was one of the first stand-up comics that went into, like, the general, hey, we can just do this like a talk show. Just like people were getting satellite radio shows all over the place. A lot of stand-up comics were getting, like, regular FM radio shows in major markets, L.A. or New York, and they had done that for years and years and years. Joe was one of the first comics that, hey, I can have this ongoing outlet for my audience.
Yep, constant contact.
Yeah, and good on him for all of those things. It's listed as a comedy podcast. I would more accurately describe it as a very loose talk show. You think very much like a Howard Stern show.
I don't know, it's entertainment. Sometimes it's funny, sometimes it's interesting.
Sometimes it's insightful, sometimes it is very not any of those things. I love, and I'm looking at the Wikipedia entry for the Joe Rogan Experience right now, but the length, it's listed as approximately 1 to 3 hours. This is the big problem with this show.
I think, first off, what are we rating?
What are we rating?
Yeah.
Oh, we're just loosely discussing the show. We're just talking about what we thought about the show coming into it. Like I wanted to tell you, I'm bringing a lot of baggage to this show. I do not like Joe Rogan in any of his entities. I don't like him as the Fear Factor host. I don't like him as the UFC guy. I don't like him as the meathead bodybuilder. I don't really like him as a stand-up comic.
Joe Rogan, I've never felt one way or the other. He's never been very polarizing to me. One way or the other, he's never bothered me. I've never really loved him. But the podcast has changed my perception of him.
I'll agree with that, both for the good and the bad. And that's one of the beautiful things about podcasting is it can really give you a fully 3-dimensional view of some of these celebrities. And it's why I'm so glad that more and more famous people are hosting their own shows, truthfully. It's a really interesting way to get to know somebody as a celebrity. Here on Pod, what we do is we review the shows based on a set of 4 criteria. Audio quality, host likability, production values, and the content itself. So with the Joe Rogan Experience, why don't we start right here with audio quality? Joe's got a great mic. He's got a good producer. This
Sounds
show's
great.
solid.
Yep.
Yeah. I mean, week in and week out, here's the one thing that I don't like. And I guess this goes more to production values than anything else, but the mix into and out of the show is weird. I don't feel like they do a very good job of that. Like there's too much music coming in. He's talking over it. Maybe that's his problem as a host. He rambles into the show. But
I think that's just his start.
Maybe so. The intro and the outro is just unpleasant to me.
I think it's still planned. I think it's meant to be that way.
Oh, sure. All right. Now, that moves us to host likability. And as I've already said, coming into podcasting, coming into reviewing his show, I did not like Joe Rogan. I was predisposed to dislike him. And you said you're ambivalent.
Yeah.
So, after exposing yourself to, I started to say 3 hours because that's our standard here. We believe that to really get the gist of a show, you have to listen to 3 different episodes of a podcast before you really understand whether that's for you or not. I listened to, and I can tell you exactly the episodes that I listened to.
The third episode I listened to really turned me around on the show.
I listened to Amy Schumer, so
I did too.
episode 485, episode 475, which is Adam Carolla, and episode 401, Doug Benson. Doug Benson's episode is 3 hours long. Amy Schumer's episode is 2 hours and 45 minutes long, and Adam Carolla's is 1 hour and 52. It would have gone longer, but Adam Carolla had to go and record his podcast, so he literally walked out. And Joe was like, well, I guess we're going to be done now.
I think I probably listened close to 9 hours. So 3 episodes, almost 9 hours.
It's more Joe Rogan than I ever imagined I would subject myself to.
Okay, so before the show, 1 to 10, how much did you like him?
A 1.5 or a 2.
Okay, after the show.
It has climbed a little, but only to maybe a 3.5.
All right.
Here's what happened. I did find out that there's more to Joe than meets the eye.
Definitely.
What you know, even if you watch him in all of his outlets, if you've seen the UFC commentating and the announcing, if you've seen the Fear Factor thing, if you've known him as a stand-up comic, even if you've seen him on other talk shows and things, you still don't. Joe is a three-dimensional human being. He is a guy of many interests, talents, and occupations, and all of that comes out in a 3-hour discussion.
Well, the good thing, so some hosts in this interview format style that he uses will let the guest talk the most, will ask a couple of leading questions that spark conversation, and really the guest is the star of the show. On the Joe Rogan Experience, the Joe Rogan, you learn a lot about the guy. He's pretty open about things, and he doesn't make it about the guest. He doesn't really make it about himself. It's more of a back and forth dialogue.
You know, one of the things that we do at the end of the show is we give alternate names for the podcast, but this is such an aptly named show. It really is the Joe Rogan Experience.
Yeah, it has to have the experience on it.
You are experiencing Joe Rogan. It's hey, come with me, crawl up inside my headspace, and get a glimpse of what I'm thinking about and feeling.
So for me, I'm going to say he was a solid 5 before the show, didn't care either way. And again, he climbed, not much. He's probably 6.5 now.
Here's the problem.
He improved both of our impressions of him.
Yeah.
Okay. That's
by about the same. One and a half points there. Here's what he did though negatively for me. And you already pointed it out. This show is not about his guests at all, even when they're really, really interesting guests. All 3 of the guests that I chose, Amy Schumer, Adam Carolla, and Doug Benson, are people that I really like. They're all comics. They've all got, you would think, interesting things to say.
Right.
Adam, I feel like, came off the best of the 3 of them, and that's because he's such a dominant personality. Doug is a little subdued, a little laid back, and he really let Joe lead the thing, and it was mostly Doug laughing at the things that Joe would say and responding to them. Amy Schumer, I feel like Joe was at times badgering her, like almost argumentative and like a little bit. Now,
well, he's an aggressive. I think he just has an aggressive person. I think he just has aggressive personality. I mean, from the start.
Maybe so.
And I think the issues that you're having with it is because of the format, because it is so long form. There's no way to make a conversation between 2 people for 3 hours interesting, on track, and focused. There's going to be things that he'll bring up that he thinks is interesting but won't get anything back from the guest. The guest may bring something up that he doesn't know a whole lot about, so you're not going to get a lot from him. So it's a back and forth and trying to find the path and find those conversations. And over 3 hours, it's going to be hit or miss.
The interesting thing to me is, you and I talked about on our 0 episode, the episode where we talked about how we first got into podcasts in the first place. You talked about your first impression of podcasting was that it was just radio that was edited down for the good bits and then put on the internet.
Right.
I really wish that someone would edit down the Joe Rogan Experience and give me the good bits, like a 15-minute Joe Rogan podcast once weekly would be great.
I would take an hour.
Really?
Yeah,
You
I would take
a
an
whole hour?
Yeah.
I don't think I could stand an hour. 30 minutes maybe. There's 30 great minutes in there some places.
Well, but the thing is because the nature of it, the nature of the conversations, you may catch something very funny or interesting the first 5 minutes, but then the gem is going to be an hour and a half or 2 hours into it. And sometimes it's worth listening to get to those gems.
So that's host likability. Production values is the next area, and this is one generally you don't care much about at all. But again, the only thing that I want to mention here is the theme song, in particular the intro, and it's like a collection of sound bites from his show, I think, and some clips from movies and a little bit of rock music. It's very high energy. I guess it fits him. I'm sure he loves it. I hated it. It was like it's a theme song I want to skip through.
It doesn't bother me at all because other shows that I listen to do the same thing.
That's one thing that will get a show cold for me. Like, there are enough podcasts out there. If you have a lot of weekly pieces of your show that I'm actively antagonized by, I'm not very likely to listen to your show very often. For instance, this is probably the last episodes of Joe Rogan that I'll ever listen to. After production values, we talk about the content itself. And you and I have already said it. There are nuggets of gold here. He finds things in that 3-hour conversation with his interviewers. You find out stuff about Joe. He's got an interesting and very original take on the universe.
Yeah, I think he's incredible. I think he himself is incredibly interesting, so it's worth me listening to. The first 2 episodes didn't catch me. It was, you know how on What Say You, episode 19 caught you. You listen to that one episode, it got you, it sucked you in. If I had started with the Roseanne Barr episode, it would have probably changed my view on the whole show.
What was it about the Roseanne Barr episode that was so above and beyond?
It's just interesting. It blew my mind how just off the rails she has gone.
She is pretty kooky. Like, she's into conspiracy theories and things like that.
It is ridiculous. But I thought he did a good job of handling it pretty graciously. He introed that show by himself, and which he usually doesn't. The guest is usually there while he's doing the intro. But afterwards, he recorded some of it because he was probably listening to it and be like, wow, if I put this out there, I don't want people to think it'd be a negative portrayal of Roseanne Barr.
Right.
So he's real gracious in the beginning and talked about how, great of a comic she is and how her stuff really holds up, but that she can be silly.
Yeah.
So that endeared me a little to him because of that.
We should say, and I haven't mentioned this yet, but this is an explicit show. I mean, if you've ever seen any of his stand-up, I think you could imagine that. But he's not censoring anything, so you have very frank discussions. You have a lot of profanity sometimes. You have a lot of adult conversations and everything. But at the same time, you discussed it in his handling of Roseanne. I saw it some in his conversation with Amy Schumer. But then a lot in the way that he was, I wouldn't say, impressed by or reverential to, but he was respectful of Adam Carolla in particular.
Yeah.
It was clear that there was a lot of respect there. There was a lot of respect with Amy Schumer, him and Amy and Doug Benson as fellow comics. But for whatever reason, he looked up to Adam a little bit, I think. That's clear. There's very much a mutual respect there. And the maturity of his discussion with him on a couple of different topics, the way in which he interacted with that potential, rival. I mean, they're competitors in the world of podcasting, as it were, and comedy for that matter. I don't know. I was very impressed by that. You just get a different look. Hey, that's a different guy than I thought it was. So all of those things are positive things, but overall, he's still kind of a meathead. There's way too many ads in this show. It needs to be edited down to an hour and a half at the most. I mean, he's got a producer there. Is it hubris, you think, to go 3 hours, or does he think people just want it?
I think he's searching. As long as he has that person there, why not have a conversation for as long as possible to get what you can out of him? Because when's he going to get Roseanne Barr back? She lives in Hawaii, man.
Yeah, or maybe they get hit by a bus, or maybe I die tomorrow, or whatever.
Right.
Maybe the show gets burned down.
Why not lay it down?
Interesting. That's an interesting... I hadn't really looked at that side of it. I guess, and if you're going to lay it down, why not put it out?
Right.
As a content producer myself, I think a lot about the time it takes for people to consume what I produce.
Yes. Yeah, definitely.
And how, well, this show particularly, you and I have talked a lot about the length of this show. We're trying to get our actual content down within 20 minutes. Hey, we want to get in and out, tell you about this show. And I mean, if we're going to do an hour about every podcast, you could just listen to the podcast.
But it's all, what you're going to miss here is it depends on your purpose.
We're trying to inform, educate on a specific topic. Joe is literally just trying to figure the world out.
And he's just trying to discover, right?
That's an interesting take on it, and I think you might be exactly right. This is maybe the first podcast that I've ever heard that's like that. It's very different.
There's no time. That's why it's like between 1 and 3 hours. I'm gonna get whatever I can get, but after 3 hours, man, I'm gonna have to go take a leak. and because here he never turns off the mic. He never edits. I can't remember who he was talking to, but the guy literally was like, "Hey, man, I gotta go to the bathroom." And he's like, "All right." And the guy gets up and goes to the bathroom, and Joe keeps talking. And he's like, "Yeah, man, these rookies, they don't have the bladder control. You know, you gotta tighten those muscles up. Like, I could go another hour and a half. I never have to drink some coffee. I'm never gonna have to go. I can sit here and provide for you guys." And because I assumed it was just gonna be a cut and then spliced together. But no, he kept it rolling.
What'd you think about my bathroom? I mean, that's how most shows work. You know, like they pause and then you come back to the action.
Right. He just kept it rolling, man.
Interesting. It really is original in that way. And I'll say this. If you love podcasts, this is one of those shows that there is a huge audience for. If you are a supporter of the medium of podcasting, it's good to get a handle on what the show's about. Just so you know, when you bump into somebody and you're like, "Oh, you like podcasts too? What do you listen to?" Joe Rogan Experience is very likely going to be in one of those lists. If you run into a bunch of people that listen to podcasts, it's that popular. I'd say, I mean, other than Adam Carolla, as far as like solo hosted shows,
Mark Maron.
Yeah, Mark Maron's up there. Good point. WTF. Yeah. Anyway, so that's the Joe Rogan Experience. That's our 4 criteria. Now, before we actually give you our rating and our final recommendation, tell you whether or not we're going to subscribe to the show, we like to have a little fun with it. Give the show alternate titles. Maybe a more descriptive, a more apt title that would tell you more about it than whatever they put in the iTunes store. The Joe Rogan Experience is the name of this one. I said that perhaps we should call it the Joe Ramble Experience.
That's a good one. This applies only to the Roseanne Barr show. I would call it Where's Weirdo?
How about Joe Rogan talks and someone famous listens?
Those are pretty harsh, man.
They're kind of true, though, too. Like, I mean, Amy Schumer's episode in particular, at one point I turned on a stopwatch. There were 3.5 uninterrupted minutes of nothing but Joe Rogan. And he wasn't asking her questions. He was just talking to her.
Whose fault's that?
Joe Rogan's.
Maybe she just needs to step up to the plate and take a couple swings. Because I listened to that one too, and I felt she was very uninterested in being there.
I wouldn't say uninterested. I would say she very quickly found there was not going to be much call for her to contribute. I mean, it's 2.5 hours long, and there might be 20 minutes of Amy Schumer in that show.
I'm going to use this part to plug again. If you haven't listened to the show and you want to listen to the show,
don't listen to the Amy Schumer episode.
Don't listen to the Amy Schumer episode. I would suggest, again, the Roseanne Barr episode.
And that brings us to our final wrap-up here. How many earbuds would you give this beauty?
I will probably never listen to an episode in its entirety again, just because it takes so long to consume. But there will be guests on that I am interested in, and to me, it's worth listening to. So I'm going to give it 1 out of 2 earbuds in.
I'm going to give it a half earbud, because if I gave it a whole earbud, I might actually be able to hear some more of the show through it. So a half earbud only for me. Look,
I feel like giving out a half earbud is worse than giving out no earbuds.
He is it was, first of all, he's been there from the beginning, and kudos to him. I like podcast pioneers. And you know what? I like Joe Rogan more than I liked him before I listened to his shows. But I do not like him as a host, and I do not like his show very much. So for me, it is not a recommended show. Ladies and gentlemen, that is this episode of Pod on Pod. Visit our website, podonpod.com. Make sure that you review us in iTunes and share us with a friend. Help them find their next favorite podcast.
Share us with 2 friends.
Yeah. So until next week, I'm Joel.
And I'm Josh.
Use your promo code Brogan for 10% off all supplements. We'll see you next week. Love you.
Are you wanting something funny? Are you wanting something smart? A show on astral projection or the history of art? Do you want to learn a language or how to play guitar? Just leave it up to Joel and Josh. Pod on pod. Pod on pod.
Pod on Pod is a proud member of the Procast Network, a ProCreate production. ProCreate is a community of artists in film, music, the digital arts, and fine arts that helps connect and collaborate on projects. You can find out more at www.teamprocreate.com. For more great podcasts from the Procast Network, try Movie Buzzed. Join your host, Zach, every episode on the Movie Buzzed podcast for good friends, a good movie, and a great buzz. The Pod on Pod theme song is written and performed by Adam Dale. Find his music in iTunes and more information about him on our website. Our musical guest this week is Carew, and you can find more information about them in the description.
Back to the wall, something falls, they throw rocks. Up their sleeves, these old thieves, they won't stop. Kings and queens in red jeans, they all lie. In your home, the one you've known, where the seagulls cry. Stones and roots in the boots, they can't walk. But cup hands, I can't stand the way they all talk. She and I, we both try to wait it out. But we both know the gossip grows dark as a cloud. Singing blues is just a ruse for your first love. Happy days singing praise I'm sick of. You, all of you, whisper the same words. But sticks and stones, all you've known, all you heard. Said, don't speak over me. I said, I am the truth. You cannot see in your youth. So don't speak over me. I said, I am the truth. You cannot see in your
the spirits come, and they sweep like a beast for your little ones. Don't be scared, say your prayers, you got nothing to fear. If you've been good like you should up till here.